What you're seeing here is where the project will be by the end of this video. So let's rewind and I'll show you how we got here. If you're new to the series, then I'll just give you a quick recap. In the first episode, we spent months modelling the Simpsons house and everything inside of it, making it as detailed and accurate as possible. Then, in the second episode, we imported that house into Unreal Engine and started adding some basic functionality to the game, like the ability to walk around and pick stuff up. And that's where we are now, but this time I want to dial it up a notch. There's quite a lot to get done in this episode, so let's break this down. The Simpsons house is floating in midair right now, so let's start by giving them some neighbours. After that, I want to put together a Cel-Shader to recreate the look of the show. Then we can set up a new skybox to complete the look. And finally, I want to make Homer a fully playable character. And there we have it, our goals for this episode. And now that we've got them laid out, we can finally get to work on the first task. First of all, we need to find out who these neighbours are. We all know that Ned Flanders is, and always has been, the neighbour to the Simpsons.
Well, need some help there? You know, maybe you folks should come over and hunker in our bunker. Oh, it'll be fun.
Oh, I'm sure I'd be a third wheel.
Oh, no, sirree. We'd be happy as hens to have
I would make it my business to be a third wheel.
And to the other side, you probably also recognise the brown house. However, sometimes it's white, like in the season 4 episode New Kid on the Block, where it appears mostly the same, but with a different coat of paint.
Hello, what's this? Wire hangers? Expired medicine? Old newspapers? Okay, Homer, stay calm. Just quietly get this stuff inside your house. Homer, you're not listening!
But just one scene earlier, we see the house in its normal colour, and this is how it appears in the intro, so we'll stick with that. Now how about opposite the Simpsons house? In the season 7 episode Two Bad Neighbours, we get a clear and detailed look at this place.
Hey, I never noticed this place.
Dad, it's right across the street from us.
And we see it again in the episode 22 short films about Springfield. But of course it wouldn't be the Simpsons if it was consistent. At other times there's also this house, which appears here regularly. This would probably suit the more uniform look of Evergreen Terrace, but the other house is far more interesting, so we'll go with that.
Your son was trespassing on my property and destroyed a very valuable stone gargoyle and... Are you wearing a grocery bag?
I have misplaced my pants.
And now that we've got that covered, we can just throw in some generic houses to fill the rest of the street. So with that out of the way, let's get modelling. So now that we have everything modelled, all that's left is to texture it. For that we'll be doing it the exact same way as the Simpsons house, using a palette. And here's Flanders' house now complete. Now I can go ahead and do this to the other houses. You may recognise this one as a reference to another Simpsons game. As you can see, in the end we decided to create this house, and we'll just place it beside the other one. We also included a few extra details, like its guard booth, and Flanders' bunker, along with an interior. For the generic houses, we've put together a few assets which will allow us to quickly create unique combinations. And finally, here's the terrain. It doesn't look the best, but we only plan to keep it temporarily. So let's get this over to Unreal and we'll put it all together. The problem with our game right now is it looks far too realistic. For the most part, all we want is solid colours separated by outlines, and so we'll need to create a post-process material to change this, and this will give us access to a variety of different render passes, which we can use to get the style we're looking for. The base colour pass gives us a good starting point because it contains just the solid colours, completely unaffected by lighting. From here we could just put down an outline and call it a day, but there's still a lot more we could do to improve it. If we take the world normal path, we can use it to tell the direction a face is pointing. Red indicates it is facing forward, green if it's facing right, and blue if it's facing upwards. We can also get the inverse of these colours: cyan if it faces backwards, magenta if it faces left, and yellow if it faces down. Now we can apply different brightness multipliers for each of the directions. And as you can see, it makes a big difference. If we wanted to take it a step further, we could even take the ambient occlusion path and use it to add a bit of shadowing to the scene. And you can see it adds a subtle shadowing effect. We could even adjust the intensity of the effect, but I'm just going to keep it at the default for now. So what about if we wanted to add some actual lights to our scene? At the moment lighting has no effect, because we still need to incorporate it into the post-process. Since the default image is the only one that contains any lighting information, we should be able to use it to extract the luminance value of the scene, but first we need to get rid of this ambient light. So for that I'll just disable the skylight and the sky atmosphere. We don't need them for this project anyway. And now that we're only getting the direct lighting of the scene, we can integrate them into the post-process, which gives us something that looks like this. Now we just need an outline. For that I followed this amazing tutorial. The link will be in the description if you're interested. It essentially works by checking each neighbouring pixel, and if the contrast meets a given threshold, then we get an outline. The only problem is that the outlines begin to clump up at range. To fix this I'm going to use the depth path to determine that anything beyond a certain distance only produces a faint outline. It's looking great, however somewhere along the way our skybox turned black. This is because the skybox isn't included in the base colour path. Luckily we can easily mask it out of the original lit path by again using the depth path to select anything that is astronomically far away from the camera, which in this case will only be the skybox. And then we can layer it on at the very end of our shader. And there we have it, a complete Cel-Shader to replicate the style of the show. I'll probably continue to tweak it as we progress, but for now I think this is a very solid foundation. For the skybox, I want to make this as simple as possible, so let's get rid of the fog, the atmosphere, and these volumetric clouds. Now we're left with just a sky sphere. The sky in the show is just a basic blue gradient with some clouds placed on top, so I think we should be able to make a texture to do exactly that and have it rotate with time, pretty much exactly how the Simpsons game did it. Something like this, though I think it would need to be quite high resolution. And if we map that onto the sky sphere, maybe we just need to adjust the scaling. So it looks like the resolution isn't high enough. But instead of just increasing it further, I think a much better approach would be to split the clouds from the sky, so that we're not wasting pixels. And then we should be able to layer on the clouds without losing quality. So how do they hold up when we zoom in?
Nice.
Now we just need to get them to rotate. We can make it more interesting by adding some variation to the rotation speed. An easy way to do this would be to split the clouds into two separate textures and give them both different speeds. That's starting to look pretty good. Now we just need a sun. And the default skybox tells us exactly how to do it, with something called a sphere mask. We just need to figure out where to put it, which is where the directional light comes in. This is what provides our sunlight, so our sun will always need to be pointing in the same direction as it. So I'm just going to combine them into a single blueprint. That way when I change the angle of the light, the sun will move with it. And it's working. So how about we take this a step further? I want to turn this into a day-night cycle. If we ever do a full rotation, we can give roughly about half of that time to daylight and the other half to nighttime. But we can't just have it abruptly switch between the two. So we'll use sunset and sunrise to blend between them. For that, all we need to do is take the same textures and give them different colours. So I'll just find some references quick and get the colours from them. So let's add them to the skybox. We also wanted to replicate the look of the sun during sunsets by enlarging it and giving it a glowing effect. And here's what that looks like. All it needs now is a moon and some stars. For the moon we can do it the exact same way as the sun, and we can take a chunk out of it to give it a crescent shape. For the stars I made this alpha mask, which we can apply over the night sky, and I can get them to twinkle by passing a noise texture over them. If we multiply the star's brightness by this noise texture as it moves, then we get some variations in the brightness. It's quite subtle, but you can definitely see it. And that does it for the skybox, but we still need to update the shader. We already have a look for daytime, now we just need to create a look for nighttime and sunset to match what we have for the skybox. The first thing we need to do is move our shader into the same blueprint as our skybox, so that we can sync up the time of day and keep it centralized to a single blueprint. And with our time of day connected up, I can begin putting together the look. I'm thinking for nighttime I just want to darken the image and push it towards blue. And for the sunset I can push it more towards an orangey pink. And now I can wire them up to the day-night cycle. I also decided to set it up so that light sources can be used at nighttime to override the tint and mimic actual light sources. But there's an issue. Materials using translucency, like our windows, are glowing bright blue and aren't being affected by our shader. This is because the translucency is contained in its own separate path, so we'll need to apply the time of day tint to that path too, and then overlay it onto our shader at the very end. And this works well in practice, however in effect it doesn't seem to be making a difference. The reason for this is because the engine is still applying the unmodified translucency path on top of our shader. To fix this I'm just going to create an empty post process and use it to override the translucency path. And with that, our shader is ready. So as you can see at the minute we're still using these floating hands from the last video. And I also briefly mentioned that I had Homer modelled and rigged, so I'll just quickly go over that now. To start off with, I gathered a few reference images, and from that I created an outline of the front and side profile, which allowed me to begin creating a rough version of the head, with the goal being to fill both the front and side profile. Then I used the remesh modifier to create a higher poly mesh, one with enough resolution to begin sculpting. This isn't something I'm very good at, but after some time I was able to get a shape that I was happy enough with. For the hands I just took the ones that we made in the last video, and after following the same steps for the rest of the body, all that's left now is to refine it and add the missing parts. Then we can remesh it once again to a usable poly count and then texture it. Now it's time for the rigging. For that I'm using Auto Rig Pro, which makes the process quite simple. And after some back and forth, messing with the settings, I was able to get something that I was happy with. I did also increase the length of his arms to better fit the proportions of the player, and some animations for blinking so that we don't have Homer staring into our soul the entire time. So now let's import him into the project. There are definitely some logistical concerns in mapping Homer's body onto the players. Firstly, his head is incredibly tall. If we tried to level the headset with his eyes, then his shoulders will be very low compared to the players. So if the player holds their arms straight out, Homer would have to angle his arms upwards to reach that position. And if the player rests their arms by their side, then Homer's probably won't extend far enough below his own shoulders. The better option would be for us to sacrifice eye level and position the headset so that Homer's and the player's shoulders are roughly level with each other. This makes the headset closer to his mouth, but at least the arms will look and feel a lot more natural to control. The other concern is that Homer is quite, well, pretty much every VR game I've played with full body IK, they only tend to use skinny characters. In part because these characters have to match the fitness of the most athletic of players, without the camera and the limbs constantly colliding and clipping through parts of the body. Despite this, I'm still determined to make it work.
It's still good, it's still good!
So the first thing I want to do is set up the scaling so that the player and their headset will always line up correctly to Homer's height, no matter how tall or short you are. Unfortunately, we can't just simply place the camera where we want it, since it will always be overridden by the real world position of the headset, meaning that we can't scale or modify it directly. We could try to scale Homer instead, so that he matches the player. However, this could very easily lead to drastic scaling issues between him and the environment. Luckily, there's a VR property inside of Unreal called the World to Meter Scale, and changing it will cause the entire world, including Homer, to grow or shrink around the player. This is exactly what we're looking for. I think the best way to calculate this value would be to tell the player to stand up straight on startup. We can then measure their height by getting the distance between the camera component and the floor level. Now we can just take the height that we want them to be in game, and divide it by the height of the player to get a usable multiplier to the world scale. So now even if I go close to the ground and start up the game, I'm still going to end up at the correct height. Which means now we can start getting Homer's head and hands tracking to the headset and the controllers. To do this, we're going to use something called inverse kinematics. This will allow us to set a target position to a train of bones, and those bones will then orient themselves in the best way possible to reach the target position. And luckily this is something that's very easy to do in Unreal. And with that applied to both the hands and the head, we've already got it working pretty well. Now we just need to move the rest of the body with the camera. I can easily set it up to track the XY position of the headset. However, that doesn't take into consideration the vertical movement of the player. So we need to somehow make Homer crouch down with them. If you remember how we recorded the player's height earlier, we can tell when the player is crouching because their current height will be lower than their normal height. So we'll assign two positions, one when the player stood at their full height, and one when the headset is directly at ground level. As the player descends from their normal height, we can blend seamlessly between the two positions, making any point in between effectively function as a crouching stance for the player. And in practice it looks to be working quite well. However, it's looking quite floaty, mostly because of the legs, but we'll get to that. As I turn my head, the whole of Homer's body is turning with it, but the body only needs to turn when we do so in reality. And the best way I found of figuring out when a full body turn has taken place is to check where the controls are in relation to the headset. If they are directly left or right of the headset, we'll assign a value of 1. Ahead of or behind the headset will be assigned 0, making it a 0 to 1 range that we can use. So as the headset rotates, we can measure where the controls are positioned on that range. While that value is low, we can assume the player is just looking around and hasn't initiated a full body turn. but once the rotation of the controllers passes a given threshold, let's say 0.8, then the rest of the body will be rotated to match that of the headset. The closer the hands are to 1, the closer the hands are to the player's side, which is when we'll want the rest of the body to follow. And with that implemented, you can see as I look left and right, Homer's body is remaining mostly where it is, but when I turn fully with the controllers and the headset, then his body will turn too. You might have noticed at this point that parts of Homer's face are popping in front of the camera. A simple solution to this would be to scale his head down to nothing, although this would also make it invisible to other cameras in the world. A slightly better option would be to increase the near clip distance to cull anything too close to the camera. Much better. However, it does have the adverse effect of allowing you to see through parts of Homer's body, but we'll come up with an ideal solution later on. For now it's time to get his legs moving. And first I want to avoid using walking animations, as they can be quite awkward, especially considering that our solution will have to contend with 2 simultaneous methods of movement. One from the controller input, and the other from the headset moving within the play area. So I think a better alternative would be to try and do it procedurally, in a way that accounts for both. As Homer moves, we'll tell his feet to stay right where they are, but once they cross a given radius from Homer, it'll animate each foot, one at a time to move the same distance ahead of Homer, where they'll remain until exceeding the radius once again. And now Homer's starting to finally look somewhat complete. There was also this issue with the wrists, which I've now fixed. So now I need to solve the problem with Homer's head popping in front of the camera, because even with near clip distance increased, the issue can still be seen. And while trying to find a solution, I came across this option, which essentially makes the mesh invisible from our point of view, but visible to everything else. But as you can see, it can only be applied to the full mesh, and not just the head. Meaning that we need to split the body into multiple separate meshes, so that we can decide which limbs to hide and which to show. And with that done, we can enable this option on just the meshes that make up the head, to hide them from our point of view. An added benefit of this setup is that it also gives us the option to add extra clothing items, like Homer's tie, and this hairpiece. The only thing left to do now is to set up the physics in the collision, so that Homer's hands can collide with the environment. And the way we do it is through something called a physics asset. We'll formulate the collision boundaries of the body, using primitive shapes like capsules and cubes. So now when we simulate physics, we get a natural looking collision response with the environment. The question is, how do we go about combining the chaotic physics engine with the precision and reliability of the animation blueprint? For that we're going to use something called physical animation. It allows us to set our strength values against the physics simulation, with which the bones can drive towards their animated positions, hence blending between the two. So now Homer's hands will follow the controllers as usual, however when I move the controllers beyond an obstruction, Homer's won't be able to follow and will just push against it. And now that you're all caught up, let's try it out.
Hello, I'm Kent Brockman, and this is Eye on Springfield.